What was something you did as a child that is now that funny story your parents tell? Story 1. When I was a kid, I had one of those toy gavel that squeaked when you would hit something with it. One day, when I was about 4 or 5, I ran into the living room when my mom had a bunch of family and neighbors over. I hit the table with this toy 3 times, squeak squeak squeak, and said order order in the court. Everyone got silent and gave me their attention. I proudly exclaimed Peter Pan has a penis, and promptly ran out of the room. My mom says the entire room was dying for a good 5 minutes. Story 2. My family has a habit of wrapping presents in other boxes. A gift card in an old TV box, clothes in a large shoe box, whatever random gift in whatever random box. I was also a very literal child who never even suspected that the people in my family are so full of malarkey. Cue little 5-year-old me opening up a present one Christmas, looking at my parents with disappointment written on my face, and with all the feigned politeness a 5-year-old can muster, saying, I guess I could learn to like Hot Pockets. I don't remember the incident. No one can remember what was in the Hot Pockets box, but it's referred to at every birthday and Christmas. Story 3. As a toddler, every time I got into an area that would echo even the slightest i.e. hotels, large restaurants, malls, I would mo at the top of my lungs, earned the unflattering nickname, Meggy Moo Moo. Story 4. When puberty reared its ugly head, I started calling phone lines. First just the 800 numbers. The voices drove me crazy, but always asked for credit cards, so I got bored quickly. Then I discovered 900 numbers. Stupid teenage me used a fake name and just assumed when they sent the bill my parents should see the name of someone who didn't live there and toss the mail. Little did I know it was being charged directly to our telephone bill. Fast forward to next billing cycle, and suddenly I'm being yelled at for a 1K phone bill. Over the years they typically like to bring it up in conversation when I'm introducing them to women I'm seeing. It's been 20 years and they've never let me live it down. Story 5. When I was young, like 2 or 3, I would walk around our neighborhood and walk in the neighbor's house and sit at their kitchen table until they came in and gave me a pudding cup. They didn't eat them, and would buy them exclusively for when I would come over. Despite the breaking in, I still wouldn't help myself to the food until it was offered. Story 6. I was around 11 years old and stayed home from school because I was sick. I'm admittedly a huge hypochondriac, so what better to do on my day off than to hop on WebMD and find out why I'm so sick. After 5 minutes of research I had pinned it down to one thing, that it absolutely had to be ovarian cancer. I called up my mom, who's a nurse, and told her the devastating news. I was met with hysterical laughter. There I am sitting in bed heartbroken that my own mother is laughing at my inevitable demise, and that's the day that I found out that men don't get ovarian cancer. Story 7. I was 4 when my parents suddenly heard me crying on the beach and running around. Spooked, I was screaming the beast, the beast, the beast again and again. Honestly, my parents thought I had a heat stroke until they saw the really tiny crab a bit over 2 inch that was chasing me. It was running, following me around, probably proud to be able to scare such a big monster. Not my proudest moment. Edit beach instead of, I think I need some sleep, edit 2. So I asked my parents and apparently, it was smaller than I thought, around 1 inch 250 cm. As to why I was followed by this crab, they have several theories. Tiny crab was proud to finally be able to spook someone. It fell in love with me despite it being a crab and me being a human. It was not chasing me around but running with me, trying to e-space Satan whose entrance I was announcing. They also told me that around 6yo, I learned how to properly grab crab, and oh boy, the tables had turned. I became some sort of terror, grabbing crabs before they tried to chase me around. My first experience with them apparently was the beginning of a long war. Did I manage to get rid of them? Yeah and no, they got undercover agents. Both my best friend and my fiancé are cancer, those crabs, always keeping an eye on me. My mom has a degenerative spine disease, and I remember when I was around 5, I learned in Sunday school that we will be made perfect in heaven. I was really excited that my mom's back would be perfect in heaven and that she would be able to run and play with me. I told everyone that someday my mom's back wouldn't hurt. Soon after, we went to Walmart and one of the greeters was missing a hand. Apparently, I ran up to the man, put my hand on his stump, locked eyes with him and said, in heaven, you will have your hand back and you'll be perfect. He actually started crying a little and hugged me, but at the time, my mom was horrified that I would grab a stranger like that without any hesitation. Story 8. At around 3 years old, I got curious about my dog's food, so I sat myself down in front of her food bowl and just started stuffing my face with it. After a few minutes, my mom, struggling to keep a straight face, asked me if I would like to go with the rest of my family to get McDonald's or if I wanted to keep eating dog food. I looked at her, cheek stuffed with dry dog food, and said, dog food. 18 years later, I still remember what dog food tastes like and still crave it occasionally because life's weird like that, though I have never actually eaten it again. Story 9. Edit. I've posted this once before when I was just learning how to speak. I noticed the way people referred to me in a sentence and assumed that was how I was supposed to refer to myself as well, so I always refer to myself as you. I obviously didn't quite understand how pronouns based on point of view worked yet. My parents love mentioning a particular dialogue between myself and my grandpa at that age. Me, you wanna go outside? Grandpa, I wanna go outside. Me, okay. Edit 2. The replies to this are so funny. Story 10. When I was younger, my mom, my grandma and I went to get some ice cream. Being the unattentive little 3-year-old that I was, I let the ice cream fall. My mom bought me another cone, handed it to me carefully, and said, keep your eye on your ice cream, and I did. I face planted the ice cream. Story 11. Back during the cyanide and Tylenol scareback in 1982, my older brother took me trick-or-treating on Halloween. When something like this me trickortreat neighbor gives me candy brother, now what do you say? Me, it better not have any cyanide in it. Story 12. When I was 3, I woke up early Christmas morning and opened all of the gifts under the tree. My parents had to kind of guess who got what because they were all jumbled together. Story 13. When learning to ride a bike, I insisted on only going downhill with the wind behind me. Now if I do anything, my parents will say make sure you're going downhill with the wind behind you. Story 14. My grandmother loved this story. She and my family loved it enough that they told it at her funeral. I'm 21 now, but when I was about 4, I had gotten up in the middle of the night and gone downstairs to mess around. I decided to play with the phone, then, I decided I should use my recently acquired phone skills to call my grandmother. Her number was one of the first ones I ever memorized. Mind you, it was like 2:30 in the morning by that point, so my grandmother actually got up and answered the phone, thinking it had to be important if someone was calling at this time. Nope. She answered the phone and the first thing out of my mouth was, "Mama, what are you doing up?" in my scoldy kid voice. My family thinks it's pretty funny. Edit, I just got my first silver, thanks, kind stranger. Story 15. I needed a cup for baseball during elementary school and the default one was too big and uncomfortable for my crotch. I proceeded to measure said region and report my findings to my mother so she could buy the appropriate sized nut protector for me to wear while playing catcher. Story 16. I've heard my mom tell this story countless times. She told me to stop playing and come eat dinner, and I responded by saying I already ate, when yesterday. Story 17. Back in 2nd grade when I was 6 or 7, 1996, I begged my mother to let me take a toy to school for show and tell. I was 100% convinced that it was my turn to bring something to school that week. I had my eyes on the coolest of cool toys, Megatron. No, not the tank that shot missiles. That was cool, but this was the Beast Wars original Megatron, a T-Rex. He shot water out of his mouth. He could eat all my other toys, Autobots, Maximals alike. I decided to bring him anyway. Despite my mother's disagreement, in a deft display of stealth and sleight of hand, I slid Megatron into my backpack and made for the door. My Huffy was outside waiting for me, all set to carry me and Megatron away from the prison and off to school to be admired by all, just as smoothly as I had stowed my friend. My mother had taken him back out of my backpack. When I turned around at the top of the stairs to say goodbye to my mother, so proud of my supreme ability to pull one over on my foolish parents, I saw him on top of the refrigerator, well out of my reach. Witchcraft, acknowledging my defeat, I heaved my backpack up and pulled the straps tight to my shoulders, then turned and thunderously stomped down the stairs. I'm surprised the house didn't crumble around me. How did she do that? How did she know I was so quick, so sneaky? It didn't make any sense and I was pissed. I hopped on my bike and started for school. I was halfway through the backyard when I decided I should take the long way. Normally, I'd cut through the yard and go down the church driveway to get to school, but that day I decided to go around the front of the house, because I knew Mom was standing in the bay window talking to someone on the phone. Oh, I had something for her, the perfect answer, the ultimate retort. I stood up on my bike and shoved the pedals around hard to build some speed. I needed for this one. I was going to go by the window one-handed, and I didn't want to fall, that would ruin the whole moment. I started my cruise by the window. I saw my mother, and she saw me. I curled my lips as far down as I could in the most epic of scowls. I was channeling my anger. I looked about as mad as a cat burying on a marble floor. My right hand left the handlebars. My mom slowly turned to follow me across the window. I shot my middle finger up with all my might. If there had been a storm, there would have been lightning in that moment. Surely it hit my mother the way near thunder hits your core. I did it, sweet victory. This would ruin her. She'd never tell me no again. But wait, her jaw didn't fully hit the floor. It stopped halfway, and she threw her head back with laughter and faded away from the window. My God, the brutality. Dad was home early from work that day. Story 18. I was playing around in our front yard when I was around 3 years old, while my parents were on the front porch reading the newspaper together. Off in the distance, they heard me say, "Here, kitty, kitty, such a pretty kitty." At first they ignored me and just kept reading together, I guess thinking I was just using my imagination or something. Eventually, my mom glanced over at me and immediately proceeded to scream at me. I quickly dropped a dead possum, covered in ants, and began crying because my mom yelled at me. They got my eyes checked after that. There was nothing wrong with them. I was just a very confused 3-year-old. Story 19. When I was 3 or 4, my dad and I were in a barber shop. An elderly man, a friend of the family, was waiting for a haircut, and he and I were talking. I think I was sitting in his lap. He had a big nose with a wart on it. I suddenly said, "You got a nose like a witch." My dad says he could have crawled under a chair, but the old man just laughed and said, "I guess I do, don't I?" Story 20. So my son was in Cub Scouts, and was eager to become a Boy Scout. So he would come in all the time asking me what he needed to do to become a Boy Scout. One day out of frustration I tell him the joke that I heard as a kid: how does a Cub Scout become a Boy Scout? He eats his first brownie. For those of you that don't know, a brownie is pre-Girl Scouts. Same idea as Cub Scouts. Well, that's the last I heard of it for a few weeks, and I forgot all about it. Then one night at a Cub Scout meeting with several different troops present, the head person asked the crowd if anyone knew what they had to do to become a Boy Scout. Well, most of them have that deer stuck in headlights look going on, but not my son. He is waving his hand in the air like a madman. They call him up and says to 100 parents, kids, and troop leaders, My daddy told me all I had to do was eat a brownie to become a Boy Scout. Funniest memory with my son. Story 21 was walking through a shopping mall when I was about 3 years old. Asked my mum to buy something, she said no, so I decided to throw it on the ground and proceeded to scream at her to get in the f***ing bin. She was shocked, obviously, but was more concerned where I had learnt such a thing from. Fast forward a couple days and my mum could hear my dad yelling at the dog that he would put him in the f***ing bin if he dug another hole. Mum tells this story all the time. I love it, huh? Story 22. There was one night where my parents learned I knew how to escape my crib. From what they have told me, there was one night where I found a way out of my crib. I then crawled all the way downstairs and to the kitchen to get a jar of pickles. There was a pickle jar in the door of the fridge and I took it out and began to carry it back upstairs to my room. However, upon getting upstairs, or sooner, I'm not sure, I discovered I couldn't open them. Imagine my mother's horror as I woke her and my dad up holding a pickle jar saying one of the only words I knew open. I think I was about 2 years old. Story 23. I used to live in a brand new neighborhood. I had a friend that lived nearby, and the fastest way to get to his house was to cut across this dirt lot behind my house. One time it was raining, and I decided I was gonna go chill with my friend. I ended up stuck knee-deep in the mud, like, completely stuck. Lost a shoe, had to have my dad pull me out. Of course my parents have it on camera. Of course it gets played at least once every 5 years. Edit. I'm sorry guys, but this video died a slow, VHS death. Story 24. I was always a very chatty little kid. Occasionally, that caused problems for my parents. For example, one time when I was about 4 or 5, we were preparing to go visit my dad's side of the family for Christmas. They all smoke, a habit of which my mom rigorously disapproves. Anyway, this particular day, we were packing our stuff. My dad asked my mom if we should bring the video camera along. Cranky, my mom snarled back, "Why bother? You can't see anything anyway, not through the haze of smoke, it's probably bad for the lens." Harumph. My dad just sort of laughed, and we didn't bring the camera. It was one of those huge old ones, a lot of trouble to pack. So fine and dandy, right? We're off. It's about a 6-hour journey. We finally get there and are hanging out. My Grammy says, "Hey little Dorganadub, did you parents bring the video camera to record you opening your presents?" Without missing a beat, I cheerily replied, "No, Mommy says you can't see anything through the fog of smoke anyway, so why bother?" Then I went skipping merrily away while my poor mother probably sank into the floor in shame. Story 25. I pooped in the tub when I was around 3 years old. I started screaming and crying, and when my mom walked in, I screamed, "Look what you made me do." To this day she brings it up and I laugh just typing it out. Story 26. Our neighbor across the street had a cat called Smuckers. Great cat. I was around 4 and still learning how to pronounce stuff. My older cousins on my dad's side found out about this cat, and every chance they got, they'd say, "Peeves, what is the kitty's name?" And I'd happily tell fuckers I'm 23, and some of them are married with children now, but we still laugh at it. Story 27. My sister loved New Kids on the Block. Loved them. Posters on the walls, cassettes, jacket pins, everything, including the dolls. I couldn't stand them. I can't remember what she did this particular time, but it pissed me off to such an extent that I went into her room, grabbed her 2 favorite dolls, Joey and Donnie, and brought them out into the living room where her, my mom, and stepdad were sitting. Then I yanked down their pants, and made them simulate, but, while I mockingly sang Hanjin Tough. Ever seen your parents want to be furious with you but can't because they are laughing too hard? I have. It was glorious. I'm talking tears streaming down their faces, they were laughing so hard. Stepdad still brings it up to this day to embarrass my sister in front of company. Story 28. When I was 4, I pooped in the bath and then tried to hide the evidence by flinging the into the never-used adjacent shower, where it stayed for weeks. My 6-year-old brother found it one day and, thinking it was a hidden bar of chocolate, went to town on it, got half that log down his mouth before violently throwing up and having a fit. Story 29. I was like 8 and wanted money at the cottage. Aunt told me I could stir the whole outhouse if I was that desperate. So I found the longest down tree branch I could, took off all the twigs, etc., then used that 8 foot to stir it up, then went to collect my money. She laughed at me, said she couldn't believe it. So I fished the branch out of the forest and left it on the hood of her car. That was my parents' favorite stupid kid and revenge story. Story 30. My mom was driving somewhere with my little brother and I in the back seat. I was maybe 5, which would have made him around 3 or 4. We were chattering with each other, and Shed kind of just tuned us out to drive. At some point she heard something though that made her tune back in. "Okay, hold real still." At that point it dawned on her what we had been discussing. She swerved the car over to the side of the road, turned, and screamed "NOO." I had a hammer swung back, ready to knock all of my baby brother's teeth out as he eagerly bared them for me. My dad had left a hammer under the seat of the car and ID found it, and somehow convinced my brother to let me knock all of his teeth out for tooth fairy money so that we could be rich. Story 31. Once when I was young, a business buddy of my dad visited our house. He told me my dad was his boss, so naturally I replied, "I'm the boss of my own poopy." I'm glad I don't remember who it was, but he no doubt remembers me. Story 32. I lived in a very small town growing up, so my parents gave me a good amount of freedom at a young age. Everyone in the town knew everybody, and starting around age 4 to 5 I would ride my bike everywhere: baseball park, candy store, town park, barbershop, etc. I particularly loved going to get my hair cut since the barbershop was a classic guy place where it was always the same 6 men working, 5 Italian guys from the same family and 1 Portuguese guy who was their friend. I would just go in and sit down and my dad would pay for it the next time he went in for a cut. For some reason, young me hated getting my hair cut by the Portuguese guy, Tony. Not sure if it was because he was rough with the clippers or if I just didn't think he was as funny as the rest of them. But whatever it was, I would wait an extra 20 minutes to avoid him. This particular time I went in, Tony was bent on getting me in his chair. He offered me candy, a free cut, even offered to sing to me, but none of his attempts caught my interest until he told me Ryborg 22, sit down and tell me whatever you would like, you sit in the seat and you're the boss. I clarify, I sit in that seat and I become your boss. Tony, you're the boss. Just take a seat, me am the boss. Tony, you to boss me. I am the boss, Tony, you'd boss me. Hops in his seat, alright. You are fired. Gets right out of his seat. The entire barbershop took a minute pause for laughter, and Tony was standing there cursing in Portuguese, slapping his towel on the empty seat. My dad came in a week later and reports another immediate burst of laughter when he walked in and them struggling to get the story out with all of the chuckles. They did not charge him for the cut I got that day. Story 33. My parents always talk about the time they got my brother his new bike when he was about 10. He had only ever ridden BMX-style bikes with kick brakes. His new bike had handbrakes. We took a trip to Yosemite and he went down a hill, built up speed and panicked. He forgot how to use the brakes and slammed into a UPS truck at full tilt. It was hilarious to my parents because he was okay, but the UPS guy was super confused about what hit him. When he finally understood what happened, he was cracking up. Basically every time my folks get a drink in them, they laugh about the time they and a UPS guy laughed at my brother for crashing his bike. Story 34. Mom likes to tell about the time when, as a child, I was with her at the bank and I shut off a long row of light switches while she was busy at the teller window. I put the place in darkness. No one saw me do it, so someone called the police, thinking maybe the bank was about to be held up. Story 35. My favorite dumb childhood story isn't mine, but my brother's. He was 6 and I was about 3. We had a huge backyard at that house, with tons of bushes and trees to play hide and seek in, a big abandoned shed in the back with spooky stuff inside, and a river below that, so we spent almost all of our free time outside. One day we were playing outside all afternoon, and my brother mentioned something about needing to go to the bathroom. We agreed that it didn't make sense to pause the game to go the whole way back to the house and upstairs to the bathroom. I assumed this meant he would pee in the bushes or something, but it turned out that he needed to go number 2, and he proceeded to just straight up in his pants. We only played a few more minutes before our mom called us in for dinner. I watched my brother waddle back into the house, pants becoming droopier with each step. He walked confidently into the kitchen and sat down at the table as though nothing was wrong. My mother took one sniff and said, "X, did you have an accident in your pants out there?" Still full of confidence. My brother looks her dead in the eye and says no, and picks up his silverware like he's about to eat. My dad just sighed, grabbed him by the collar, and dragged him upstairs to take a bath without another word. My brother pretends that he doesn't remember this incident, but I will never let this story die. Story 36. Not me but my little brother. When he was 34, my dad was on the bus to visit my gran. He noticed a bald black guy and said very loudly, "Dad, that man has a Malteser head." The guy heard him and laughed. Story 37. We watched Kindergarten Cop on TV one afternoon. That evening, in perhaps my first attempt to reference anything, I tried to repeat the boys have penises, girls have vaginas line. What I actually said was boys have penises and girls have toupees. I don't know, my old man was dying laughing. He called family members and, "You gotta hear what so much coffee just said. Hand to God, that's what he said." Story 38. When I was about 2, I picked up a pine needle and said, "I'm picking up a leaf." Somewhere we have video evidence of my first swear word. Stuck mine in a jar of chili powder. Story 39. One time when I was young, I was helping my dad de-root dandelions out of our yard. After a while I was like, why are there so many of these freaking things? My dad said, well, there was this little boy who came into our yard and spread dandelion seeds everywhere. Me annoyed we should kick his. It was me. Story 40. Mum passed away years ago, but would always repeat this story. When I was in kindy, we were told to go home and read the newspaper with our parents. I was an early bloomer and could read before I went to school. I read the front page and asked my mum, "Hey mum, what does Carrie Packer scandal mean?" Mum seriously repeated that story to every teacher I had. So embarrassing, but I laugh now. Story 41. My little brother has 2 situations like this. He was walking with my dad and he saw a pigeon and said, "Let's catch it. It tastes like chicken." And another time he saw a person smoking and said, "Are you gonna carry on smoking or should I kill you now?" Story 42. My cat never used to eat her biscuits in front of me and I never understood why. So I used to get on my hands and knees and show her how to eat the biscuits, by eating the cat biscuits. The other favorite was when I was really into making potions in the backyard. I had my first crush and knew I needed my own DNA to make it work, so I cut what I thought was a little bit of my hair off to put in it. I ended up cutting out a massive uneven chunk of my fringe. I remember crying behind a book at school the next day because the boy I had a crush on would never like me back because of how bad my fringe looked and because the love potion didn't work. Story 43. When I was a child I really used to enjoy snow, so in the middle of the summer I realized that it's too long for me to wait for it. At the same time my grandma was making pancakes and there was a bowl of flour on a table. When she left the room I decided to make my own snow. I took the flour and started rubbing it everywhere and spreading it on the table and floor, but when my grandma came back I got scared that she will take the flour away and I won't be able to have my snow, so I just started doing everything faster. While she was standing there in shock, laughing and not being able to stop me. To this day my grandparents keep reminding me this with laughter, even though I see it now as a brat move for me to make. Story 44. I have no memory of this myself. I was still quite young. One time our family were around at a friend's place. Mums were friends. The wife's husband was from London and spoke with a very London accent. We were all seated at the table, and he said something no one can remembers what now. As my mum tells it, she was looking at something else but listening to him to say it, and then say it again exactly the same way. She looked over at him confused as to why he said it twice, but he was just staring at me. Apparently, I mimicked his accent with expert precision. I must have been fascinated since I hadn't heard many other accents at that point, but had no idea how rude I'd just been to copy it. Story 45. I was an only child, so my parents have tons of stories that they still tell people about, but this is the best one. As a kid, I loved commercials. If cartoons were on I was playing, but the second a commercial came on I was glued to the TV. My mom and I were in a store buying groceries when I was around 3. I looked at her and said, "So seriously, Mom, do you ever have problems?" She was confused, but answered, "Well yes, Miss a Frog, everyone has problems." It was then I replied, happy as can be to be able to quote something. "Try Massengill, it's the only one I trust." Massengill is a brand of him. Not sure why they didn't just throw me away. Story 46. I was such a diva growing up. Once, I was in a touristy wooden furniture store when a group of Western tourists came in and spotted little me with shades on, chilling on one of the grander carved chairs, and started snapping away. Being the girl that I was, I jumped down from the chair and started catwalking around the store, arms akimbo. A couple of people must be wondering why are there random pictures of a little Asian girl lying around in their old cameras. Story 47. My twin and I filled the gas tanks on the lawn equipment, mowers, trimmer, etc. with peat moss. We were so proud because we helped Dad with gas. I got my head stuck in a chair and had to be cut out. My brother covered the baby brother with baby powder. Apparently the baby looked like a ghost. Brother cranked up the temp on the fish tank and cooked all of the brand new baby fish. Story 48. Once when my brother was at the doctor's office when he was like 7-ish and he had his blanket tucked into his pants and the nurse said, "Oh, you have a tail," and he responded with, "It's not a tail, it's a penis." Story 49. When I was like 3 years old I came up with something that would help me get out of trouble. Whenever my dad would be scolding me for something I did, I would say, "Me de just gonzo," which translates to "You called me gonzo." My dad would start laughing and then would let whatever slide. I don't remember how I came up with that at all. Aside from Gonzo was my favorite Muppet as a kid, but it worked for a good while. Story 50. The time when I was eating a peach and said it was dry, then my mom, who grew up around a farm, said it was because you need to add water to make it juicer, so I went up to the sink and just turned on the water and tried to make it juicer by adding water to an already developed peach. Story 51. Don't know why I got mad, but when I was about 11 or 12 I gave my mom all my clothes because she said I was grounded or some, and made some underwear out of newspaper and duct tape and told her I would just wear this. My waist was pretty messed up from the adhesive when I ripped it off after we laughed about it. Story 52. When I was probably about 8 or 9, my family went on vacation to the Great Smoky Mountains in Tennessee. There are a lot of petting zoos up there, and my family preferred to do those cheaper outside activities over things like theme parks Dollywood and overpriced dinner theaters Dixie Stampede, because we were a family of 6 at the time. So we go to this exotic zoo that has all the normal stuff like goats, llamas, etc., but also some more uncommon animals like camels. It was going well until the last part of the zoo. It was a section devoted to birds. I have this irrational, terrible fear of birds. There was no way around this section of the park as it led right to the exit gift shop. I begged my mom to let me find another way around or ask an employee to let me somehow skip this part of the park. She refused, not wanting to ruin the rest of the family's final stint through the park, so I just ran through the section crying. Just full-on bawling, refusing to stop and look at anything and drawing attention to our family by being so loud. My mom was mad that I wouldn't interact with any of the park guides or animals, and that I rushed everyone through the section. Now she thinks it was pretty funny and frequently tells this story to friends and family. About 10 years after this happened, she finally told me that when I was a newborn she had a pet that hated me and would on my head and try to peck me, which is most likely what caused my phobia. Story 53. When I was a toddler and I was in the room with my grandmother while she watched Law and Order, I would look at her whenever the Dun came on with a face that apparently said, "Uh-oh, it's about to go down." Story 54. I was coming to grips with swear words. My dad was filming me and I start singing "Twinkle Twinkle Little Star," except I changed the words to "Twinkle Twinkle, Little, Twinkle." My dad, "What did you just say?" Me cat showed off to my friends at my first communion by in the bushes outside. That was the first time I got grounded. Story 55. I apparently spent whole days digging out all the plants in the garden and replanting them upside down. Every time my parents fixed the garden I went back and did it again. They gave up on having flowers for the duration of my childhood. Story 56. I was an anxious little kid. I think I watched some show or movie where a house blew up from a stove gas leak. So from then on I had a routine right before bed. I'd go check the doors to make sure they are locked and then go to the stove and check every dial to make sure they were off. Then I'd climb on the counter and give each burner a sniff to see if I could smell any gas leaks. Story 57. I filled the tape player in my mom's car with pennies, so she had to replace the tape player. Then I filled the new tape player with pennies, and she never got it fixed, so for years we couldn't listen to tapes on long road trips in my mom's car, all thanks to 2-year-old me. Story 58. When I was about 12 or 13, My grandfather had a giant bell donated to his church. He put the bell on display outside in front of the church. I was examining it for the first time like a curious kid. Apparently while I was doing that my brother and grandfather were inside the church. This was their convo. Bro, grandpa, are people able to just walk up and ring that bell? GPA, yes. Bro, isn't it really loud? GPA, yes. Bro, so aren't you afraid someone will ring it? GPA, only an idiot would ring that bell. Bell ring 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 ring. Loud AF. GPA, well there's your brother.